Welcome to Perfectly Planted Podcast. I am your co-host, Vesime and I. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And if you are part of the Perfectly Planted community, thank you. And thank you for joining us again. Daphne, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Vesime. How are you? How was your vacation? It's good to see you back.
I know. It's so great to see you. And, I can't believe it. This is our last podcast for 2022. This year has gone by so fast, and I know we have a good one for you. But you asked me about my vacation. Yes, I had a lovely time. It's such a must. It's such a must to do. A getaway and just disconnect. Sorry, from just daily life and the hustle and bustle, whatever you want to call it. And especially now with the holidays, I think that when everybody's just striving for all the wonderful memories and the perfect memories, I think you'll find that the book that we chose, I know you're going to talk about it, is a perfect one.
Perfect memories.
Yeah. Right?
Well, that is a good introduction to today's book. So today, Vesime and I are going to be sharing with you our thoughts on Brené Brown book, The Gifts of Imperfection. I don't think we need to introduce Dr. Brené Brown. I imagine everyone globally has heard about her. She is a licensed medical social worker. She's a writer, a researcher, and a professor at the University of Houston. And, I honestly can't remember when I first heard of Dr. Brené Brown. I've watched all of her TED Talks. I think I have most of her books. I gift her books to people whenever possible, because I think she just has a way of distilling down the things that are in the back of our brain that you kind of know, but then you're like, oh. So The Gifts of Imperfection was published in 2010. And I wish that I had this book when I was in my 30s, because it may have allowed me to make some different decisions than I did as I was going through my career. And, as Vesime and I talk today, and I hope that you have an opportunity to pick up the book from your local bookseller or from Amazon and read it. But in each of the guideposts that are in Dr. Brown's book, she has a DIG, D-I-G, deep section. And DIG is an acronym for deliberate, inspired, and going. And what Dr. Brown does is she challenges us to get deliberate in our thoughts and our actions and our behaviors, and how we get inspired to make new and different choices to take action and get going. So that was a long introduction, Vesime, and I will let you kick off today's conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's perfect. I think, gosh, Daphne, so I think mine was an updated version because it talks about how COVID has impacted us in the beginning, like a preface. Yeah. But in each section, I mean, I dog-eared every single section. There's so many amazing nuggets in this book. Yeah. And I think that I'll probably read it again and gain more that I didn't catch the first time, and again and again. And you mentioned you weren't sure where you met, Dr. Brené Brown, or when you first heard of her. I remember I was watching the Oprah show. I think she came on, and I was like, who is this lady talking about joy? And we'll get to that in a second. Like, how do you feel joy and really feel it without feeling vulnerable? And so she talks about that a lot. But I think we picked this book as our last book review of the year, especially this month, because I actually think it's so especially now in life, during the holiday season, we strive for these perfect memories, like I mentioned earlier, and it's really not possible. Mm-mm. And I think that perfection is something that we define as ourselves. Each person has a different perfect. And so when you're trying to meet this state of perfection, it's just unattainable, And so especially for these perfect memories, perfect gifts, perfect, decorations, the perfect Christmas cookies and gatherings and all of that. It's like, it's just unattainable. And so I think that when we go into this and while you're reading the book, I mean, really open your mind and understand that perfection is not something that you'll ever achieve. It's something that you can get close to, but at the same time, you're also missing out on some of the joys of life by trying to strive for the perfection and not attaining it and getting disappointed or falling down or fearing or feeling vulnerable or what have you. So I think it relates to this season, especially, like I mentioned. Also, I wanted to talk about, how this book makes you relate to feelings and emotions, our daily wins and losses, and how we react to each of them. I had a moment when I had one of those moments when she was at the beginning of the book. She states in the preface, it says, how much we know and understand ourselves is critically important, but there is something that is even more essential to living a wholehearted life, which is loving ourselves. Yeah. And so she talks about that self-compassion and self-love also in order for you to be the best version of you, really. And it's constant. It's not something that we will always achieve. It's a constant process. It's something that'll continuously change. And I know we talked about splitting this book review into 2 sections because there's just so much. So we're going to kind of speed through some of these sections, but absolutely, as you go through having, I think she talks about the wholeheartedness, living a wholehearted life. And how do you achieve that? And through research and investigation and all of her interviews, it's like the people who live wholeheartedly, really the components of it are courage, compassion, and connection. And she talks about each one as well. So anyway, that's a lot. I know it's so much to unpack, but I think the initial message came from the very beginning and very start of the book of really just, starting to love ourselves.
And that is something, I agree with you. It is a journey. And I don't know, for anyone watching or listening, can you actually look yourself in the mirror? And I talk about this sometimes on my blog, can you give yourself a high five? Can you love yourself? So in the book, Dr. Brown has guidepost number 2, which is cultivating self-compassion and letting go of perfectionism. And Vesime, you're 100% correct. This season in particular seems to drive people to feel that they need to be perfect. And I've been victim to that myself. But, I think starting this podcast and starting Perfectly Planted was a great opportunity. And I don't know about you, but for me to get over that, we could talk about it forever and we could wait until it's perfect, but then we'd never get started. Mm-hmm. And, we spend a lot of time working for people and working with people that are trying to be their best self. And I feel like the first step to that is, 1, recognizing that perfection is unattainable. If that's your goal, then you need to revisit what your goal is, because it will just impede you from being successful and it will impede you from being happy. And in fact, it can, Dr. Brown, and my book is as dog-eared as yours. She has on page 57, she talks about kind of her different thoughts and how she breaks down perfectionism. But, and I'll just refer those listening and watching to take a read on page 57 because it's too long to read. But the summary is that to overcome perfectionism, we need to acknowledge our vulnerabilities to the universal experiences of shame, judgment, and blame, and develop shame resilience and practice self-compassion. And, along with that, it means that you can't be afraid to take risks in life. You can't be afraid to fail. I think we get into this feeling that being perfect means never failing. But I would challenge you to say, if you never try, one, you don't know if you'll succeed or fail, but the failure is actually, I think, tied to that sense of shame more so than really failing, because it's an external judgment that you have failed. It's not an internal judgment that you tried something I mean, if we look back at our first podcast and we look where we are now, it's evolved. I won't say it was a failure earlier, but it wasn't perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. But there's a huge intersection between perfection and shame. And if you internalize that, then you're never going to want to do anything that challenges you outside of your boundaries of what you think is perfect.
No, that's right, Daphne. I mean, I think that there's that vulnerability portion of, do I open myself to being vulnerable, and for the fear of failure?
Mm-hmm.
And failure is actually your perception of what other people think.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So it's really internalized. It's really you setting you identifying yourself as failure. And you know what? We didn't do this when we were trying to take our first steps as babies. Time and time again, we failed. And I think that, failure is part of success. It took me a long time to realize that. A long time, because when I would fail at something or didn't make it as perfect as I thought it should be, I would just go back in my shell and follow the leader, because I didn't want to throw myself back out there for fear of what others would think.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really personally and professionally, both. And I think that she talks about, there's one chapter about just that, letting go of perfectionism and living your most authentic life and authenticity, and what makes you authentic, because everybody matters. Everybody matters. And so why do we put ourselves in this box that we think we should be living in? And I think, there's a quote, it's, Theodore Roosevelt's quote that she talks about too, that I love.
Yep.
And it's that comparison is the thief of joy. When I first heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times do we go through, social media scrolling? Social media is back. Before social media, was magazines or television shows. And you're constantly comparing yourself with these models or with actors, actresses, whoever it may be, singers, and it's like, you're trying to be like them, but you're missing out on what you can provide to this world, because we are all here. It's a gift to be here, and we all have something to authentically bring to the table, essentially. And so that oftentimes I have to remind myself, even today, how comparison is a thief of joy. Stop comparing yourself with somebody else, because you don't know their story. Number one, you don't know what struggles and failures that they've gone through that you haven't, for fear of being vulnerable and failure that you've essentially defined for yourself. And so it's just like this cyclical beast of self-doubt that really harbors us from doing what we really want to do and what we would thrive to do. So we talked about how the courage, compassion, and connection. And she talks about, this is the whole courage part of it. I mean, I think courage plays in a lot of pieces within her book and all of her guideposts, but I mean, that's the courage. Like, how do you get out and understand that it's okay to fail? Mm-hmm. Failure is actually good, and I tell my kids that all the time, because, I don't want, as a mom, I don't want them to ever feel discouraged because they failed, because it's not a win or loss. It's a win or learn. You learn. What did you learn? What can you do better? What can you continue to grow on? And it's going to be a continuous growth stream. That's it. I mean, that's it's that you don't think that you're going to have there's soccer games. Don't think every single soccer game is going to be perfect. It's not, some will be better than others. but you should learn from each one. That was a lot.
Nope. That was great. And
I actually really also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Daphne. Did
no,
you have
you go
something?
on.
Oh, no, I think we're going to get to this section in a minute, but I love the quote that it's actually a line from a song that Brené recites. And I'm sorry for any of the Leonard Cohen fans. I don't know Leonard Cohen, and I'd never heard this song, but it's a song from Anthem, and it says, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So these get pieces of imperfection or pieces of failure, whatever you may call, actually allows you to thrive and continue to be a better version of yourself, or in other side, just living your best life.
There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. I love that.
Yeah.
And it also means that crack means that there's an imperfection in that. And it's funny because if I think back when we worked together, I remember then learning the concept of fail fast, where failure wasn't thought of as, people were afraid to fail. We know, and we know reasons why.
Yep. No, it was our culture, right? It was a culture. You don't fail. You're going to win this. Yep.
But if you don't, I feel like you get in the comfort zone. It's really too easy not to push yourself, which is why I love what you do with your kiddos, because if they're always navigating between the lines or coloring between the lines, they'll never find out what they can do as a stretch. And, maybe they don't win the game, but they learn something every single time.
Yeah, Daphne, I laugh because sometimes they'll take it and they'll listen to me on that. But sometimes they're like, yeah, we learned that we lost. You know what I mean? So I'm like, nope. Let's go back to this one. We'll come back to it. Let's eat something and then we'll come back to it. Maybe you're hangry. But no, it's like, it's true. It's true. It's constant growth. And, if you fail, you're not alone. If you win, you're not alone. So it's one of those things where why do we put such a negative stigma? And I also wanted to go back real quick to that quote of, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I find that a lot of people around me, in particular, want to numb the cracks. And I know Brené talks about this, and we're probably going to dig in a little bit more on it. And that's not good, right? Like, it's okay to have, the days that aren't so great. It makes the days that are great even better. But, I think that at times that perfection stigma that surround us is hard to achieve a lot of days. And we end up trying to numb it, whether it's being overwhelmed with so much, being perfect at work, being perfect at home, and I see it a lot. I see it a lot of numbing. And it's one of those things where, it's whether it's just pouring one glass of wine that ends up being 2, that ends up being 10. Now, I'm not saying don't have wine. I'm saying, and because I've done this, Daphne, this is, I used to want to chug a beer to try and like relax myself, and I'm not an alcoholic, but it would be, I would be like, oh, it was a thought, like, let me just like, drink something and let this all go away. Or it was a little much and I couldn't handle it. Let me just have a glass of wine that ends up being half the bottle. It's reality. And I've been there. It's just one of those things where that's not the way to face it. And I know Brené talks about ways of not numbing it and not living in this dark and not numbing the dark, because then you're going to also numb the light.
No, you are 100% correct. And I think, I don't know if numbing got worse with COVID. I do think that there's some numbing behaviors that have seemed to be more prevalent now, but trying to help people find ways to sit with their feelings is probably something that's really hard. Rather than the numbing doesn't make them go away.
Right.
The numbing just delays you addressing what is really either bothering you or upsetting you, or where you haven't succeeded in that, realm of perfectionism. But you can't numb the problem away. It will
Right.
still be there. And eventually you need to find a way to, and I can't remember, it was a book I think we reviewed last year, sit and stew in your shame, your fear, your unhappiness, and understand what's the path forward.
Mm-hmm.
And, let that crack light, let that crack allow some light to flow in, but you have to let the crack happen.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true, Daphne. I mean, I think that we try and put putty over those cracks. It's like bubble gum. It's going to break again,
Yep.
and so just accept it and learn from it and move on. It's so much easier than said. I think that, Brené talks about how she's battled addiction and through this numbing. And one of her friends through the 12-step process put together a vowel check. And it's on, I'm wanting to say that our pages are the same, Daphne. It's on page 99, where A is, have I been abstinent today? However you define that. E is, have I exercised today? I is, what have I done for myself today? That's a big one. You asked me that several times, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, my workouts. So I kind of sometimes put the two, because the exercising is what I do for myself each day. That is my outlet. That is my mental health break. But I don't do anything. I mean, maybe I do, maybe I don't. It's hard. You have to think about it. The O is, what have I done for others today? I find that when you do something for others, it also brings you joy.
It does.
For myself, that's how it is. And I want to speak for others too. It's when you do something for others, it does bring you joy more than receiving. The U is, am I holding on to unexpressed emotions today? And the Y is, yay. What is something good that's happened today?
Exactly.
Which I love that.
And that vowel check, the page numbers are a little different, so we can, I'll make sure to update that in the blog post, but that is a good daily check to go through. Especially for people who, if you journal, it's something you could journal about, or if you do that 5-minute meditation at the beginning or end of the day, that's something that you could actually ask yourself. But you need to do something to reward yourself too.
That's right.
So, Vesime, going on to, you talked about gratitude and joy, and I want to pull that thread a little bit, because have you ever been afraid to be happy? Because have you ever felt that if I'm happy, I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. Someone's going to take it away from me. And does that somehow tie into, that paralysis you get because you're almost afraid if things align, if I'm happy? And this happened a lot, as we were preparing as I was reading the book, I thought about it, and you may think about it with your kiddos, but I thought about it with my parents as I got older, and I felt that I thought they were invincible. And then as they grew older, I realized they weren't. And then I started worrying about them to the point that I would think about them or call them, because in my mind, I was generating all these ideas. They didn't call me back. They didn't text me back. Did they fall down the stairs? Did something happen? Are they in the hospital? And it almost robbed the joy of the time I spent with them, because I was so worried about the things that could go wrong that I wasn't always happy in the moment. I mean, when you were reading that part of the book, what did that do for you?
No, it's it's something, that was my first introduction to Brené, was that whole feeling of joy. And feeling of joy, immediately you go into this like primal state of somebody's going to take it away. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to feel this. I'm not going to feel this happy because it's going to go away soon. And just that fear of feeling joy, even constantly. And up until, I didn't realize I would do that. Or, have you ever felt that like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful, but like, I hope this doesn't happen now,
Right.
it's just that fear. And
Yep.
you take it to another level and you're just not enjoying the moment. And I do it a lot. And what I do is I'll try and just sit with the joy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I'm great at, I'm no expert, Daphne, but I do, since I've heard that, and how you fear the joy not being there. So you're not going to feel it fully or wholeheartedly, as she says.
Yep.
You don't enjoy it. And so it's like, well, then if I'm not enjoying that and I'm fearing this, it's like, what am I doing here? And so I will try and sit with joy and just, ward off any of the, fears that may come off, just shut it off. But also I think that she talks about, gratitude as part of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So gratitude, she talks about just the normal days. And it's so true. I had a coworker whose wife was, had a baby and then had an immense reaction, that blood pressure. I don't know all the details, nor should I share it. But, she was in the hospital for days. She acquired an infection.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I remember they're telling me how they just want a normal day. You get joy in just having those normal days where you have your normal routine. And do we take time out of our everyday norm to be grateful, to express gratitude for, I do, for taking my kids to school.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a chore for me. I'm grateful for it, because when I don't get to do that, I feel a void. So it's some of those things we're just trying to sit back. And I guess I want to encourage our readers and our viewers to, really grab this book, because it does open your mind to the frequent day in, day out emotions that we'll feel, and why we feel, and how can we, I don't want to say do better, because I don't want to say that means that we're not doing great. I think we're all doing great. It's just acknowledging the great and being grateful for it.
And I think that ties into, Brené has another quote that ties into the one you shared earlier, which is, the dark does not destroy the light, it defines it. Mm-hmm. It is our fear of the dark that cast our joy into the shadows. Mm-hmm. So yes, sometimes we don't always enjoy just the little things, just the everyday, which should be so joyful to all of us. So there were so many parts of this book that
go on for another 30 minutes. Hey guys, how long do you want to stay on?
Yeah, we do need to talk about this one, because I can't let us go without talking about self-worth and about play and rest. So one of the chapters in the book is cultivating play and rest, letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol, and productivity as self-worth. And yeah. So, I would love to ask you how you assess your self-worth. Is it how many contracts you get signed? Is it how many clients you have? Is it, are your clients happy? Are you tired and afraid to slow down because you worry that others will judge your self-worth, or judge your worth, not your self-worth, against those objective measures that don't necessarily have as much meaning?
Yeah.
I mean, I know when we worked together that there were days and nights that we burnt the candle at both ends, because that's how we felt we were being judged or evaluated or assessed, or that was, to be honest, my perception of my self-worth was my presentation perfect? Were the clients happy? Were we bringing in more contracts? And that became a vicious cycle of, I judged myself based on that metric, which was exhausting. And that exhaustion and that, always climbing the ladder as a sign of status didn't necessarily bring happiness.
I don't know where to start, Daphne. I mean, yeah, it's, it's that achieving that perfection, right? Of what is expected from you. And oftentimes I feel a spotlight on me. Oh, she's done this before. She could do it. It's like, well, I have, but, is it the right way to do things now? It's just one of those things where you oftentimes feel that pressure. And you shouldn't be making a mistake. And it's like, well, I do, I'm fine admitting it. I do make mistakes. And because why? I'm human, And so it's that self-forgiveness, I think, oftentimes, but also that productivity and meeting your quota and making sure that you're still on top. Just the other day, I was given a spreadsheet at work to show what you originally planned you would bring in and what you did bring in, again, in the sales world. And I misread it at first. I'm like, what? How am I down there? I should be number one, And then I look and I was just like having self-doubt. I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't the way it should be. This isn't. And then I started giving myself excuses and whatever. And then I read it again. I was like, oh wait, no, I'm number one. Sweet. And I was like, what is my problem? What is my problem? Like, that's not the way to do it. And it was like, I had to smack myself in the face for that, but it's that constant, you're working and trying to prove yourself and climbing the ladder and getting the title and, making more to spend more type of thing. And it's like, okay, let's give it a rest. And up until now, she talks about play and rest. And up until now, it's like, just recently, I'm like, wait, what? What's rest? I feel like I'm wasting time if I rest. But it's like your time should include rest. It's like, wait, what? It's taken me so long to really come to understand it and what that means. And what I found, is that, your mind does need to rest and shut off and just take a break. And because you'll do better that way. Nobody wants an overworked, overstressed person around them. Your family doesn't, your friends don't, your coworkers don't either. And so it's just that, taking a quick 10-minute mental break or a walk around, like you've mentioned so many times, that just clears your mind is so important. It's as important as, if I'm being honest, it's as important as brushing your teeth every day, twice a day. It's like you need to do that. You need to do that. You need to clear your mind. And I think that I want to believe that COVID for many people made them realize that, okay, we're kind of overworking ourselves, like driving to the office, driving back and getting back on our laptops. And after we come home from a 1-hour commute or whatever it is, and getting up early to try and make it in early and just overworking ourselves. It doesn't do us any good. How are we living our lives well that way? What do you think, Daphne?
Oh,
how often do you rest, Daphne? That's what we all want to know.
So that's a good question. I've spent, and I'll admit that I've had a little backslide recently, but I spent the past several years cultivating boundaries So my sleep is a boundary.
Mhm.
My gym time is a boundary. I have a streak that I'm on. I call it as a streak. I have a consistent pattern where I force myself to go outside for at least 5 minutes every day. The 5 minutes could turn into more, but I have to get out and see the trees, hear the birds, get some sun at least 5 minutes a day. Um, have I taken a vacation in the past 2 or 3 years? No, which I know is bad because you do need to rest and recharge because I think you come back stronger that way. But I've tried to carve out and create some clear boundaries around bedtime, gym time, walk time, even meal prep time. Those are things that I do not allow to be violated because it's me time.
I think it's so important to do that. I mean, and you have to start somewhere. So I'm not saying, Daphne, how many times a day do you nap? But I do want to know that later, but you could tell us
No
later.
naps.
But I mean, it's one of those things where I don't nap either, but taking those breaks and putting the boundaries, like you say, are so important. It's such a good first step. So you don't necessarily need like 5 boundaries that you have to do every day. Start small.
Yep.
I was actually just running on my treadmill. There's, they do multi-parts of a marathon, and I'm doing the New York City Marathon in 6 different parts. So don't worry, I'm not running 26 miles like in one day. But I will say that, they were talking about how some of the most elite runners say slowly and slowly, take it slowly, slowly. That's how you do it, and take one step at a time. It's not a race. It's not that you have to do 5 or, whether, we try and make people live their healthiest lives, right? Daphne, I mean, you especially. And it's one of those things where it's like, you're not going to just jump in and lose 30 pounds. Like, no, it's not. It's first make small steps to changing, whether it's your nutrition or getting out to walk or whatever it is. And then you start to build from there. They're like Lego blocks that you build up. You don't just build this big tower that it's going to fall down and fail, because then you're not going to get anywhere.
You are 100% correct.
And then what about the play part, Daphne? Let's talk about that. And then I think we're going to have to wrap this thing up.
Okay.
We're going to talk forever.
Let's talk about play.
I think that it's really important for us to, I will admit, it's hard to admit this, but, when my kids are like, hey, can you come out and play with us? I'll be like, I have to cook dinner, or I got to finish something else for work, or I have to do this. And I don't do it often. But when I do, that guilt comes in, and it's like, why am I doing this? Like, the laundry folding can wait 20 minutes, And so it's one of those things where also, so Brené doesn't talk about that, but Brené does talk about how you should take time to play, whatever that means for you. So it could be that you want to go for a walk and swing on a swing. It could also mean that you want to color for 10 minutes or, play with Play-Doh or cook or create something. It's just that cultivating the creativity in us and what we used to do before we were too busy to do everything is so important. And so, oftentimes it also lifts your spirits to just, how I've forgotten how to play up until, my kids coming. It's like, what? Oh, wait, we could play. What should we play? Hide and seek. And it's just that creative, like, let's create a game. It's a creativity that I try and tap back into my childhood self, or whether it's dancing in the kitchen. I know Brené talks about that too. We do that. It's just one of those things that you just have to, take a break from the seriousness and really do something that can enlighten your life, or something that you enjoyed in the past that you may have, locked away. It's so important to do that, Daphne. What are your thoughts on that?
Vesime, I couldn't agree with you more. And play is not getting on Facebook or Instagram and scrolling. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that, I love to, so I still listen to the happy song every day because it makes me happy. And that little dance, those little steps, dancing around the kitchen is something I enjoy.
Yeah.
Luckily, no one can see it. Um, and, stupid little things that maybe are not play, but in the morning, when I take a walk, I always see I walk by the train station and I always wave to the bus drivers, just like we would do when we were little kids.
Yeah.
Now they wave back, and occasionally they'll get off and they'll say, "What are you doing?" Or, "Are you walking? Are you running? What are you training for?" Um, just the little stupid things, going up and down the stairs at the train station. I
Mhm.
I try and inject little play moments when I can, because they do lift my heart. And sometimes, and I don't feel stupid doing it. I just, because it makes me happy.
And it's that connection piece, right? So you're connecting with, whether it's the train conductors or the bus drivers or whatever it may be, it's that connection part of this book that she talks about that's so important. Because we do need the human connection with others, that just to lift each other up. I know that I've heard it several times. It's like, smile at a stranger, and it's like, it's not creepy, you guys. Like, I'm not trying to make it like creepy, like smile at every
Wave
like
at the
stranger
bus
person,
driver.
because there is stranger danger too. Like, I do teach my kids about that. Yeah, but like waving at the bus driver, or, smiling at somebody in the grocery aisle, it's just one of those things where, why not? It
Why
does
not?
give, yeah, why not? It will lift your spirits up more than you think.
Or playing a game with your kiddos.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Jump in the trampoline. Go to the bathroom first.
Maybe we'll talk about pelvic floor
We
exercise.
can talk about that later.
So you're right. We could, again, for anyone who may just be tuning in, we've been talking about Brené Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And we are the first to acknowledge that we are imperfect souls. But I embrace my imperfections now more, differently than I did in my 30s and 40s. I think my 60s will give me a different perspective again. But I wanted to read a page from Brené's final thoughts. And what she says is that wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It's about cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. So I hope all of you feel that you are enough too. Oh, Vesime, what a way to wrap up the year. This will be our last Sunday Seedling for 2022. But the next time you see us, it'll be a new year. And we may be more talkative than we were in 2022. Who knows? I think this went from a 10-minute health snack to a 30-minute health snack. And now we're coming up on a 45-minute health snack. So stay tuned to learn more about what awesome guests we're going to have in 2023 and some more amazing books that we're going to review in our book club. But more importantly, we hope that whether you're listening or watching in real time or after this is live streamed, we hope you're enjoying these conversations, and that maybe it's planting some seeds of positivity, knowledge, and empowerment in your life that will help you become your best self, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And to remember that, just as seeds and flowers bloom over time, that we're on a continuing journey of growth.
Well said, Daphne. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us. We want to wish you all the very happiest holiday season and really enjoy your time with family and friends. We hope that you take time to embrace the joy that you feel without fear of it being taken away from you.
Exactly.
Really, really enjoying those tender moments that you have and knowing that being perfectly imperfect is wonderful too. So we hope you all are well. Enjoy, and we will see you all next year. Bye, everyone.